All right, so for those who need a little bit of catch up on what we're doing for our midterm, if you go to, in our class, if you go to course content, under major projects, you will see we got the midterm listed. And there's not much information in here. It's all in these documents. You can ignore the .fla file for a while. We're going to go over that next week. You want to start with the one that says midterm. It says spring 2015 because I forgot to change it. And all right, so what we're doing is we're building assets for a Flash game, and I have examples that I can show you from previous classes. Some of them are a little bit different of an assignment, but it's the same idea. And we're gonna be you're gonna be doing animation and design mostly, and there's gonna be a little bit of code, but that's going to be something that I give to you. You're not gonna have to write anything from scratch, anything like that. Yeah, I don't care. All right. So for your midterm, you're going to be building assets. You will use the characters you pulled from a hat in class. For those of you who are there for that, you'll remember pulling the names and adjectives out. For those of you who weren't, I've emailed you what your character is. And you're going to need them to do several different things. And this is going to be right here in your game. This is going to be probably taking up the most of your time is this first part. Main character with animation. Right, so first you have to design the character. That is actually what your homework is for this week to bring in for next week. They don't have to be completely finished. I'll go over in a minute what point they have to be at. But you need to design them with the idea in mind that they're going to be doing certain actions. And these actions will make more sense when you see the examples. But still running, jumping, right? Like, so still animation, they have to be doing something while they're sitting there. Running is their characters walking back and forth across the screen. It could be run, jump, walk, I don't care. Or I'm sorry, run, walk, slither, I don't care. A jump is, you're going to see the characters jump. And then the hit and wave are basically a one-time action and a continuous action. So it could be someone throwing a punch or someone waving at the screen, or it could be digging in the dirt every time you hit the button, or I don't know, hiding in fright every time you press down on this button. But the idea is that the hit is every time you press a button, it's once, and you can have button mash. And the wave is something you would hold a button down. That's going to be taking up the majority of the time. Beyond that, you're going to make two different backgrounds. And I'll show you how you can place them in Flash in two different scenes within your file. You want them to make sense given the character that you were given. But you can design them in Illustrator, you can design them in Flash, Photoshop. That's up to you. The third thing is a splash screen. You're going to see a few of these in examples, and it's that sort of, hey, the game's about to start kind of screen. Bare minimum, it needs to have some kind of background and a button that says start or play or enter. Please don't just make it the same background. People used to do that when the assignment was different. Now I want them to look kind of interesting. And then the fourth thing are buttons. So you design buttons that are to play something or stop something, toggle sound on and off, toggle background changes or color changes, go to the options. You're going to design 4 buttons. These buttons don't actually have to do anything. We're not getting that far into the code that you're going to be able to press a button and make this, go to the options page. We're not adding that amount of interactivity. This is actually very much like you guys are creating assets and then they're getting handed off to another department. So I want to show you what some of these games look like and how simplified you can make the characters and still make something effective. So, right, this is an example of a splash page. Doesn't look anything like the actual game, and yet it goes with it. So there's the character's still pose, right? Like rocking back and forth. This is him walking. This is a jump. You can see his little hat comes off, his little arms and feet just kind of fly in the air. And then, there it is. So that's one button, and there's the other one. Right, so I can hit it, and he slashes, or I can hold this down and he waves. Alright, another one might be, for those of you who maybe are concerned about your drawing skills, you needn't be. Flash is really good at making stuff look like it's drawn by a kid. If you draw with your mouse, then you can get these really cool like crayon drawings, and so you can get a cool little dude like this. Now I have to play guess which button. There we go. And then, ooh. Very, very silly. Let's see. This is an example of one that was designed in Photoshop, so it doesn't have to be vector based, right? You've got this sort of crayon sketch look to it, and he moves his little feet. One thing I will note is that Photoshop files can be very big compared to your Flash file, so you want to make sure that when you import it from Photoshop, it's close to the size you want it to be. It's not huge, because if it is, you're going to want to shrink it in Photoshop. Otherwise, your file gets too big and things don't work properly. Here's one with a really good splash screen, right? Like, that's awesome. It's got really good looking buttons too, right? The character's okay. He kind of moves around. I think he gets, yeah, angry. There we go. So you're very open on what you can do in terms of the character's actions. Let's see. This one is interesting because he got vegetable, so this is his angry vegetable. You can see some of them are facing forward while they're walking, and then others are in like a 3/4 view, like this one. Right? So you can kind of pick and choose which view you want them to be in. I don't know if anyone has done... I don't think so. No one's done a straight on profile, really. It's always 3/4 view, or they're facing camera and yet somehow kind of waddling from side to side. Right? So, but what I want to show you is how to think about your animation. Because we're not doing that yet. But when you're designing your characters, a couple things to keep in mind. Let's see here. There we go. When you're animating them, whenever you get to that. There we go. For example, the run is going to be like this. You're going to run them in place. And then the code is what actually shifts them left and right. Same with the jump. So you need to come up with something that they do. You can see him right here. Everything kind of flies up and then kind of hits back down as he lands. And the end result, of course, is this. But before that, it's just... Oh, that doesn't go away. It's just this little bit of animation where he sits still. So you need to give him something that can move when he jumps other than the whole body. So it's usually, in this case, it's tiny hands and feet or a little hat. Having little hats can be good because they can kind of move things. So you can keep your puppet very simple. This guy is very, very simple. But you need to have some parts that can move besides the face, because you can't really just have a face and have that indicate running and jumping and things like that. You need to have some sort of, limb, even if it's an implied one. There's the swing back and forth. It's just an effect that kind of fades on and off. It's very well done. And then the wave is just the arm waving, very simple. But you can see that this timeline is really, really rigid. Like, it's this section and then this section. You can see lots of keyframes line up. That's by design. And we're going to go over that in class next time. I'm going to show you how to set this up with these flags. And then what you'll do when you finish your character is copy all of their layers into this movie clip so that it can be in this timeline and all lined up. If you have your character pretty much done by class, then you can actually, once I set you up your timeline, walking you guys through it, you'll be able to put all your pieces in here. So if you finish your character and you want to change, each part into a movie clip so that you can start putting them in the timeline, great. If you don't, then you'll just do that when you finish. The other thing to keep in mind is that you can't always change things after the fact. So, for example, once you turn a piece into a movie clip, it exists in here. Let's find out which piece. Body. Right, so it's this piece right here. Which means, let's say you've got it mostly done, you put them in the animation timeline because you kind of want to figure things out, but later on you're like, you know what, he has to have some kind of, completely making this up here, but I want to give him some kind of collar or something. Whoops. Object drawing needs to be turned on. There we go. Alright, I want to give him some kind of collar. Well, it'll be there now everywhere because I've added it to that little movie clip, to that symbol that was for his body. You can see it up here in the library. So as long as you come to class with all the pieces actually started, that's pretty much where you want to be. Even if they're not finished, maybe they're not polished, you haven't quite got the color scheme right, you want to change the shapes up a little bit. I'm going to do because that color looks more like I don't know, like it's choking him. There we go. But you can always make changes to these pieces. So if you come in and you at least have all of the pieces kind of set up and the proportions are there, like the size and shape are there, then you can set up this timeline with me in class while you have me, making sure that you have all your different pieces on different layers, and we kind of get this all set up properly. And then you can work on adding the little details or something later. All right, so you definitely want to have all your pieces in there, even if they're not completely finished or polished. All right, and speaking of a timeline, you can see we've got a schedule down at the bottom here of the little document that shows what we're doing. And so in class this week, we had gone over exactly what we're going to do, learn how to set up your file, and we assigned characters. Oh, we got a bit of a typo there. Whoop. Oh, I can't change it. So we'll set up your timeline in class next week. Your characters have to be, I should have been mostly finished by now. I am going to give you the code that would make animation work. We're going to kind of take a look at that. If we have time, it depends on how class goes. If not, it'll be on this date. And you'll have a lot of class time to work on finishing the characters, starting animation. We're not actually going to set up your timeline first thing. I'm gonna like go around, see where people are, kind of get you set up, maybe have a refresher on how the library works, symbols, movie clips, that sort of thing. By the following week, your animation needs to be all in there. So you need to, because that's when, definitely by then, we'd be actually inserting the code and making sure it works, because then you can kind of tweak your animation once you see it looping, because all of this is based on looping. All right, so you can't do that if you don't have animation actually like in there. You should have all of your assets at least started by then, meaning that's what I mean by design. Again, if they're not polished, you'll have until the next time. Most of the work should be done. So you should have something that's really gotten going. There's not going to be any lecture that day. It's all going to be troubleshooting, adding details, and polish. If we come up with something that, oh my god, half the class is running into it, I will give a brief lecture on that. But it's due the 22nd. The first hour, again, is going to be, troubleshooting. You should have it mostly done, but like that one thing that's been bothering you and you weren't able to email me about it, we can get that tied up. And then we're going to be doing the critiques on Blackboard. So your critiques are going to be here in the discussions board, where there is nothing right now. But there will be a new forum that says discussions midterm. And you guys are going to post your games on there, and people are going to look at them and they're going to give you feedback there. All right, so just so you know, the other document that's in there is, let's go back to the midterm. This is more information on the actual animation timeline. It'll be more relevant next week, but it's a better description of what your character is going to do. So still, this is the animation of your character just standing there. It's a rundown, of what I said earlier. During animation, I wouldn't worry about that till next week. Please do not skip ahead and start adding animation now. You do not want to do that until you get to class, because as I said before, it's a very specific way animation has to be set up. For example, these vertical rows of keyframes, you'll see when I click on them, the character is identical, and it's identical to the start. Oh, there we go. It's actually identical to that's the end of everything. Whoop, there we go. See, they're identical. I think actually this still starts like that too. Yeah. So this is meant to allow for all that looping, because if things are not identical at the start of each one of them, then you're going to have weird flipping things happening where, the walk doesn't line up with the jump and things like that. All right, so I do believe that's it. Should give you a decent idea of what to expect from here. If you're going to use photographs from online to kind of collage something together, which is perfectly valid. Make sure they're not copyrighted to someone else. So use Flickr's search. Use Flickr, and then you can use their search and say Creative Commons, and it will allow you to search only for things that you're allowed to use in education.